What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and today we're finally following up the manual versus electric series. This time, the espresso version. So let's go ahead and unveil the contenders. We're going to start here with the hand grinders. Over here, this is not actually the hand grinder I'm wanting to talk about. I just couldn't find my Jmax, but this is representative of the Espresso Jmax hand grinder, which I have praised for being a lovely espresso hand grinder. And so just use your imagination. This is a little thicker body Jmax in your mind. Okay, so we've got the Jmax, which sits around just under $200. We have here the Linglong, which is a 64 millimeter hand grinder. So this actually has flat burrs inside. You can buy it for 150 bucks. It's directly through Linglong. He is an incredible equipment creator, but he takes his precious time making these things. So if you're wanting to get one of these by the end of the video, just know it's not the easiest route to go, but it is something I think is reasonable to include here because it shows what can be done at certain price points without sacrificing quality of parts, quality of everything else. It is a superb little hand grinder. Next, we have the Espresso K Ultra. So this is something that I've talked about quite a bit as well. The K series from Espresso, another one that's around that 200. I'm not exactly sure price point. We have here the Kinu. Lots of different models of Kinu. They all have the same alignment though and the same burr set unless you get the pour over burrs. So this will be representative of Kinu in general. And then finally we have the Pietro, but not with my burrs inside, but with the multi-purpose burrs. They took a similar approach to creating their multi-purpose burrs with the kind of methodology I put in place when we created the Pro Brew burrs. And so these multi-purpose burrs inside are actually quite nice for espresso. And this sits around that $450 price point. Now, I wish I did still have my Orphan Espresso Lido because it would be in this lineup as well, but alas, that's already been given away to a Patreon member just a couple of years ago. But anyway, this is what's going to kind of set the stage for our manuals. On espresso for electric, we start with the DF64. This is kind of one of the big ones that a lot of people at home use with lots of different variants, whether it's Generation 1 or 2 or DF64V or whatever it might be. And this can also be included with the new CF64 and all the 64s type of thing. If you're looking at 64 millimeter electric burrs, this is kind of representative of that. Of course, we have what was the darling of home espresso enthusiasts because of its kind of innovation with the single dosing and workflow type of focus. This is the Niche Zero for those that still have it or that are familiar with its flavor profile. Then finally, at the highest, or I guess I should say around 400 bucks for this. I think this is now around 500 bucks. And then the Cavitec Monolith Max 3. This is a very well-known high-end grinder built in Seattle. It costs around, I don't know, 3,600 bucks, I believe. But this will kind of represent our big boy 98 millimeter burr size, and we'll talk about different burrs along with that because this can not only house their own specific burrs that they make in-house just for their grinder, which turn counterclockwise, but can also house a plethora of SSP burrs and the like. I'm sure there are grinders you want added in, but hopefully you can deduce from things that I say what might make sense in your own comparison from things that weren't included today. Like for instance, I was considering including like the Time More 078 or 064, but this is representative of, even though I think the 064 is a bit better, this represents that in a way. And the 078 I think can also be somewhat represented by this when it comes to in-cup flavor profile with the stock burrs on the 78. Hand grinders are absolutely incredible and can go a long way fighting pound for pound with electric grinders. Now, a lot of the reason for that is these hand grinder manufacturers are able to take a certain amount of money in order to do R&D and to construct their build without having to worry about motors and all the gadgets inside the PCB, the programming, all of that stuff. Let's say the DF64 costs $100 to build and then they sell it for $400 because they go through resellers, etc. Now, let's say it takes $100 to build the Kinu. With $100, you have a lot more you can spend on since there's no motor, there's nothing like that you need to worry about, the certifications, all of that. You just can straight up work on the actual bare bones of this grinder to make it as quality as possible. So there is a lot you can do with a lower price point when you're not using or relying on a motor and all of the different things that requires for alignment when you can just rely on something like these, which are axle driven, or something like this, which has kind of an axle that goes into the burr in order to make it spin, like so. Lots of people still have this fallacy that they need the newest, the shiniest, the brightest. But in reality, how much difference is there between the cup quality and the cup potential within these grinders? So let's just go ahead and start right off the bat. So with the Jmax, this is something I have praised a lot, and it's because it is a fantastic espresso grinder. Not necessarily for the full spectrum of espresso. For those of you that may not know, there are loads and loads and loads of new ways of pulling espresso nowadays. We've gone from just the traditional 1-to-2 style shot to pulling these things called allonges, which are like 1-to-5 ratios with a specific flow rate. We've got things like the turbo shot, which is a super fast, low pressure type of shot that is just speeding through a coarse bed of grounds. We have things like the ULC and LC profiles, which I've talked about in other videos. These low contact profiles that a guy that goes by Long has created, which have produced some of my favorite espressos ever, but they're 11, 12, 13 second shots. We also have blooming espresso, which requires a much finer grind, but kind of focuses on high extraction while maintaining some of that acidity presentation. There are loads and loads of styles of espresso. Now, where the Jmax really excels is with that type of traditional approach of a shot, something where you're wanting to get syrupy bodies, something that you want to have that really incredible mouthfeel, something that is not going to cause bitterness whenever you're sipping on it in order to get mouthfeel. A lot of times, grinders will rely on the fines and particulates that make it through the basket to bolster mouthfeel. This is one that allows for a smooth mouthfeel with incredible body, everything else that does not necessitate some sort of reliance on a really poor particle distribution to bolster and to give you. So with this, I think this is one of the best traditional approaches to espresso one can get. And in fact, a lot of people think the niche is kind of the cover boy or whatever, the cover girl for this type of thick espresso. I would 10 times out of 10 choose a Jmax produced espresso over a niche. Now, it has nothing to do with bias against niche or bias against the price in comparison. It has to do with the mouthfeel. When I want a traditional style of espresso, which for the record, in recent times, I have changed, and I do really enjoy those. Used to, I was all just light soup type stuff, but I do have one specific darker coffee I enjoy as a thick shot of espresso, and that is from a Neapolitan-based roaster called Saka. They have this crema bar that is really nice. It's 60% Robusta, way out of left field for me, but the mouthfeel that this can give me is sublime. It is matched only by something like a Eureka Specialita, which I think does an incredible job with mouthfeel, or if you take an EG1 with core Burrs, or even the base Burrs, or if you take something like the Monolith Max and you put in something like their SSW Burrs. So the mouthfeel I get from a Jmax is akin to those. Incredibly smooth, incredibly elegant, thick, honey-like, syrupy, molasses. It does a fantastic job. With the niche, I actually get, I just don't like the Mazzer Burrs inside of here, the Mazzarconi Burrs, 63 millimeter Mazzers. They tend to really rough up those grounds. You get a lot of these particulates in the cup, which cause a rough texture to me. So whenever I want a darker roasted coffee, if it's between that and this, I'm going with the Jmax. Now, to compare it to like DF64 with the stock Italmill Burrs, I would say they're a bit closer. This leans more towards sweetness. This one has a bit more of an acidity presentation, the DF64 does, with those Italmill. Not saying it's an acid bomb. Don't get me wrong. These Burrs are not an acid bomb. But in comparison between the two, the Jmax tends to err a bit more on the sweet side. So I really enjoy the Jmax. I think it does a fantastic job, and it's really difficult, if that is your style of espresso, very difficult to beat it unless you're willing to spend a ton of money. I think that the Specialita is about the equivalent in the electric grinder world to this. So if you're wanting to get if you have a Jmax and you're like, I really want electric, how much do I need to spend? I think the Specialita is your best bet. But after that, honestly, you're not going to get better texture unless you're willing to go to some sort of big 98 millimeter burr that's specifically designed for a texture type of situation. For instance, I do prefer these sweet burrs, the SSW burrs in my Monolith Max for these darker shots. But if I wasn't going to spend $3,000 and I wanted electric, Specialita would be my cheapest option, in my opinion. Other than that, the Jmax is tops. Move over to this Linglong. This is the Burrs set in here is very similar to the 64mm multi-purpose Burrs. Shout out right here. Now, of course, we know that this Burrs set is not specific to SSP. They just made a little bit of changes to some original Malkoenig designs, but regardless, what they've done is fantastic, and these are similar, kind of like clones inside of this hand grinder. So this definitely does the opposite of what the Jmax specializes in. This is more so for more bright, vibrant coffees, acidity, turbo shot styles, Olanges. Can it do traditional? Yes, but it does bring out acidity even in coffees that don't have very much. And so it can taste a bit more thin, it can taste a bit more punchy whenever you're trying to get that really nice, thick, kind of syrupy shot. So I would not recommend this for people that are in the camp of the Jmax. With the Linglong, this is for people who want to have that 64mm multi-purpose type of engagement in the cup. Someone that wants a Zerno because they can get the MPs in it. This is something that will give you almost an identical cup as far as the quality goes in cup. When it comes to espresso, this thing is capable of making, honestly, in my opinion, just as good of soup as anything else with 64mm multi-purpose Burrs inside of it. It is a pain to use unless you use a drill. So that's one of the downsides is when you're in the espresso realm, it can be a pain to grind all that up, and it can be tenfold that when you have flat burrs that are horizontal. So it is a pain, and I would never recommend using this for espresso unless you use a hand drill with it. But at $150, this is without question, for those people that like light roasts and want the kind of soup shots, this is without question the best quality espresso you can get before diminishing returns. Again, for the light roast enthusiasts that want those alternative style shots. Absolutely incredible. Beats out DF64, and even with the multi-purpose Burrs in here, I still give the edge to Linglong because I do believe that the alignment and the build of this is much better than this stock. And so if you're going to, and you do need to rely on alignment a bit more with these low fines producing Burrs, I think this does just a better job all around. You put this against a Zerno with its Hyperline multi-purpose Burrs and the fact they're both blind. I think now they sell this grinder with both blind Burrs, and mine only one is blind, but it's going to be, I don't think really anyone's going to tell much of a difference at all if they're both dialed in perfectly well. So I think this is the best light roast enthusiast hand grinder before diminishing returns, which is crazy because it's only $150. Now, again, you'll have to find his Instagram, message him to purchase one, and it takes him a long time. So I'm not saying it's even a realistic option because it can be a bit of a perturbance, but worth bringing up. Now we have the K Ultra. This is the most kind of straddling the line of all of these. This can do dark roast style shots well. It's similar to what the DF64 does for darker roasts. Not as good as the Jmax, but it does give you nice body, but it'll kind of bring out some acidity you may not want in those darker style shots where you're seeking for texture first and foremost and sweetness. But it does an okay job with it. It also does an okay job with lighter roasted coffees. It's not as good as the Linglong. It's not as good as these other 64mm grinders that can house an SSP burr. It's not as good as this if it has SSP burrs in it. But again, we're talking about a lot more budget. But this is what I think the ideal travel grinder for people who do both filter and espresso when they're traveling, because this can switch between filter and espresso and do them both quite well. It is very similar, and I give this the edge in cup quality, and I have for years, but this is very similar to a Comandante, and I think this actually produces a bit better coffee, a bit cleaner, a bit less astringent, and it has a bit more range in how good it goes across the board. Does it match 64s? No. Does it match even the Vario with the Ditting burrs in it? No. I think those are much better, much more clean, but it does a solid job, and you have the option of making solid filter. Linglong, of course, does incredible filter. This does not do filter at all. The Jmax is not very good at filter at all, in my opinion. Now, if you like really dark coffees and it doesn't really matter, then sure, this can do fine. But if you enjoy even a medium roast, this does filter just fine. Linglong's going to be better. DF64 with any other burr is going to be better. Moving on, Kinu. This is an incredible grinder. Super well built, super well aligned, fantastic burrs inside for espresso. Like the Jmax though, it is definitely geared towards more syrupy, sweet shots. Now, I would actually give the nod for taste and cup to the Kinu over the Jmax, so it is a bit more expensive, so keep that in mind. I think maybe their lowest tier one is maybe cheaper than Jmax, but I absolutely love this grinder for espresso. It brings out the sweetest coffees always. It's kind of like what people discuss the Didding Lab sweets to be in cup, this actually realizes. I have found very hit or miss with Didding Lab sweets because manufacturing, sometimes they're warped, yada yada, but this gives you that really sweet, syrupy kind of cup, really good balance. Again, it's something that doesn't do incredibly well with light roasted coffees just because it's aiming for a different style cup. So if you're trying to force something onto it, it's not as good. Not saying it's bad, just not as good. So between these, I love them both for darker coffees or more traditional styles of espressos. The edge does go with the Kinu. I just think it's slightly better built. I don't like the dialing as much. I much prefer the external click system on the Espresso. And honestly, for that reason, for usability for me, I would probably go with the Espresso, but in cup, I give the nod to the Kinu. So if this internal dial system isn't annoying to you, this could be a fantastic option. I'm so lazy. I would the external clicks here is just incredible. On the Jmax, it's also like 8.8 micron movement per click, which is super, super, super precise. So anyway, that's kind of where we're going with there. This does play with the big boys as well. You take the Weber with the core Burrs, or you take even an EK43 with their Turkish Burrs, or you take whatever you want to think about. This is going to match, if not exceed, quality expectations against a lot of those grinders. Absolutely fantastic espresso grinder. Next, we have the Pietro with the multi-purpose burrs inside. So again, these are not the ones I designed. I have nothing to do with these, but they are a fantastic, more traditional style of espresso grinder. So when you make coffees here, you're having similar results to the Kinu and the Jmax. This is very similar to the Specialita in cup. It gives you very robust coffees. That being said, it also has a little bit of this type of standard Ital mill where it can give you some decent acidity, and it does pour overs pretty well, being flat burrs. So whereas these two are kind of not good at all at pour overs with their stock burrs, this one can do pour overs well, similar to the K Plus or the K Ultra, and it does espresso incredibly well. You can also get away with lighter roasted coffees with this one that you can't really get as good of results with on the other two. So this I would compare more so to stock burrs in the DF64, just with a little higher quality presentation. I think some of that might be alignment or might be a slower grind due to your hand speed or whatever it might be. All I know is that this does a fantastic job, and loads of people are very much obsessed with the burrs in here, even though the workflow on this is abysmal. So though they are now shipping it with the stands, which is what I pushed for when they launched, but they're finally doing it, which is great. Anyway, that's kind of the Pietro. Now, when we come over to these grinders and we ask ourselves, what is the point of getting an electric grinder when we have such good hand grinders? Well, when it comes down to it, it becomes, quality of life. People don't want to wake up and hand grind, so they look for what is the best possible option I can buy to get the coffee I want automated. So something like the DF64 has taken off, and it's because even for the price point, it is quite well built. I mean, it is a solid metal grinder. The internals are fine. They do a good job. The burr set they're using is a good burr set that's built to spec. It's not a wonky, weird burr you get in some of these cheaper, kind of faceless grinder companies. It does a solid job. The filter coffee is a little lacking. This one's at 1400 RPM. It can get a bit more blendy. I would choose pour overs from the Pietro or the K Plus, and definitely the Linglong over it when it comes to that style of coffee. If you toss in other burrs, that's another $200 on top of what you've already paid for. We're getting really into a monetary question of, is it really worth it if it does do better? And again, I think that Linglong is better even with the DF64 that has SSP burrs inside. Oh, obviously it's better because it's twice the price. Granted, it's about the same price as Pietro. This is crazy expensive. But, it's a great grinder, and it gives you a lot of capability to switch around and play with your burr sets or whatever it might be. Thankfully, there are now cheaper burr sets coming out. But in the end, out of the box, it's a good grinder. It's just not the best that you can get with that money. If you're spending that money, I do think that a hand grinder is going to serve you well. It'll serve you a little bit better, unless you are already planning on buying some sort of burrs to outfit this switch which will give you more flexibility, obviously. But the DF64 still, I think, is a great grinder. I do think the Time War 064 is a better grinder, the 064S. I think that at this price point, you can do a little bit better. But for now, I still think this is a great option to have at home. Though you may be leaving a little something in the flavor department on the table. Is it big enough for you to make a switch and be miserable hand grinding? Probably not, but that's where we're at. Niche grinder, again, I have been kind of not a big fan of the original niche for a while. Like I said, I'm just not a fan of the Burrs set. I like the workflow of it. I think I think it was before its time when it's kind of a trendsetter. But the coffees that comes out, I don't think it really specializes in any one department. There are people that think it's a chocolate bomb or whatever, and to those people, I would ask them to dial in a coffee with a specialita in this side by side. Tell me if that specialita does not have the same amount of chocolate notes without sacrificing incredible texture. This has been something I and a lot of other people I've talked with independently have noticed is just a texture issue with this machine. And I think it's I think it's those burrs inside. But I think this gets you better texture with the multi-purpose burrs. This gets you better texture just with the stock burrs. The Jmax gets you better texture. Now these two, they're not really a texture forward grinder, so I would say that it's about the same when it comes to texture. Even with the 64 millimeter multi-purpose burrs, when we're talking texture, not weight, texture. This one just kind of is not comfortable on my tongue. The good news here is unless you're someone that likes lighter roasted coffees, so somewhere between medium and light or extreme light, ultra light, you are good and hitting diminishing returns in cup quality with these. You are not going to get an incredible increase in cup quality if you go up to a $4,000 grinder. Now, yes, you can do these DRM grinders. You can do these cone ones that are 71 millimeters, dual cone, $4,000, $3,000 machines. And maybe confirmation bias will tell you it's a lot better. But in reality, I have not been blown away by any difference in cup quality when using a darker roasted coffee on something like a Kinu and something like a $3,000 cone burr grinder. Of course, quality of life, build quality, art piece, all of that stuff, that's all up to you. It's your money. But if we're speaking strictly cup quality, there's not that big of a difference. And it's because the darker your coffee is roasted, the more brittle it is, the more impossible it is to really dial in your particle size distribution. It's just an impossibility whenever you are at really dark roast styles. You're going to create a lot of fines, you're going to get a lot of body, you're going to get this syrupy style shot. And so there's not as much flexibility whenever you're trying to cut those beans. Yes, you can lessen some of the heat damage, you can improve throughput, you can make a wider surface area, and you may cut down on some of the bitterness or some of the end kind of finish, which is a bit more difficult for a novice to really tell the difference between. But if you're a seasoned person that has really been enjoying dark roasted coffees for a long time, I'm not saying you can't tell the difference between, say, that big monolith cone burr grinder and a Kinu. Yes, there's more surface area for the beans to go across. Yes, there's a good chance that you're going to have a little less bitterness due to the way it's been interacting with those cones. But the likelihood of the majority of people knowing that difference, very small. But where this really separates itself and where the money really does come into play is if you are a lighter roast coffee enthusiast. So if you're not, you're good. You're going to kind of peak pretty early because there's just not a ton to do with darker roast coffees with that 1-to-2 style ratio. And that's why it's been such a traditional ratio. Grinder technology has not been anything until the past couple of decades. And so it didn't really matter. People were doing 1-to-2 because it was forgiving, and dark roast coffees are forgiving, and it doesn't really matter. Not to say that you're invalid and it's not a complex beverage if you like darker roasted coffee. So don't come at me in the comments that I'm insulting. I'm not. I'm just saying you're in a good place because there's a lot more leeway, a lot more forgiveness when you're enjoying darker roasted coffees. But where the big boys really step apart is with their capabilities with lighter coffees. Yes, the Zerno with 64 MPs does an incredible job, better than the DF64 with SSPs because of its alignment, because of its auger feeding system and all of that. But when you get to bigger burrs, you have more play on the geometry face, you have more capability in the design, you have more capability on the throughput and grounds hitting, more real estate without being, completely slammed in a traffic jam with other grounds, which can cause a lot of friction. So you have the capability of really retaining a lot of aromatics that you would otherwise potentially burn off or lose during the grinding process. So when you get to these HU burrs, the LU burrs, the ULF burrs, the light medium medium burrs, you know, even the sweet burrs do really well with light roast. All of these burrs are doing things that you really just don't have the option to do in smaller grinders when you are going with lighter roasted coffees. They're not as brittle. You can control the particle size distribution much better. And an easy proof of this is if you want to go look for particle size distributions online, look for those posted by Nestle, and then look at some of the ones that I've posted or that Gagne has posted or that others have posted with light coffees. And you are going to see a vast difference in both fines production and unimodality. And it's because lighter roasted coffees simply are able to have more play in their particle distribution due to them being less brittle and a bit more solid. So during the cutting phases, you don't get a ton of teeny tiny little pieces of shrapnel. When it gets to these big burrs, and when it comes to lighter roasted coffees where you're trying to retain nuance, you're trying to amplify acidity, you're trying to maintain aromatics, it is going to be a big step when you get up to the 80, 98 millimeter kind of area where you're really able to play around with some of these more intense burr sets that can really focus in on specific styles of extraction. So if you're into these Olanges, these turbo turbos, these blooming turbos, this ULC, LC, this kind of soup style, it is going to be a big change. There's no hand grinder that can compete at all with these big 80, 98 millimeter specific burr sets. So for instance, the ULF burrs in the EG1, some of my favorite burrs to do this light roast type of soup. The tossing in any 98 millimeter like the HUs is going to be difficult to compare with whenever you're using a hand grinder doing these lighter roasted coffees. So, although is it a $3,000 difference from the K or the Linglong? Heck no, it's not a three. But again, it depends on who you are. If you're a billionaire, yeah, it's $3,000 difference. But the majority of us are not billionaires. There's only a few in the world. So, but also worth's in the eye of the beholder. If this is a huge hobby in your life and you're obsessed with it, then yeah, of course. I mean, I own a lot of these in-game grinders, and it's because for me it is worth it. I'm someone that really likes to, sit and pour over my shot and really understand what's going on in the cup, and I simply can't do that with these other grinders. Does that mean I can't get great shots with them? Absolutely not. Don't hear me say these can't produce good light roast soup type shots. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is a bigger step between these grinders and something like a monolith, a bigger step with lighter roasted coffees, modern style of shots, than there is between these grinders and a monolith for a darker roast coffee or a traditional style of coffee. All right, so the obsession with burrs, the obsession with all of this money spending flagrantly only should really be a consideration if you are super into light roast coffees and alternative shots. All right, I feel like I've been beating a dead horse, but I wanted to make that crystal clear to you all because this is the big departure in the video, is that there is a big difference when you get to the big boys. In filter coffee, it's quite different. You can get to the biggest of boys, and honestly, someone may prefer a CP6 or a Pietro Pro Brew to a 98 millimeter brew burr filter coffee. That's a possibility. I don't think it's a much of a possibility for people to taste a really well dialed in 98 millimeter HU SSP burr on a monolith or on a P100 and honestly choose one of these or even one of these two over that. Not if they're into that style of coffee. I genuinely think we could have a huge sample size and the majority, statistically significantly, would choose the bigger boy espresso grinder. And that's just because they're able to afford a different experience in cup that you can't really get with these smaller burrs. Is that saying something like a 64 millimeter Phylos or 64 millimeter Zerno is incompetent? No, I'm not saying that, but it would be irresponsible of me to say that there's not a decent jump when you get to 98. I know that'll be unpopular. People have been wanting to say that. There's even one burr manufacturer that says burr size only helps with throughput and volume. You can get the same particle distribution if you emulate the burr geometries. That's not true. I've done this many times, and that's just not true. We can get into why that is, but I think that we've already gone too deep in the rabbit hole in this video, so we can save that for another time, maybe an Unfiltered where I rant about my experience in burr creation and things like that. But just know that's not the only reason why you go with a bigger burr. All right. So there's a reason on the market these in-game grinders are employing big burrs and not smaller burrs, and it's not just for fetishization of bigger is better. This isn't just a Texan type of thing. So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to say today. Yes, you're going to say, oh, why do you pull shots? Well, it would have been a pain in the butt to have to hand grind shots. It's already hot out here in Portugal, and I'm sweating in here doing this video for you all. But if you're not going to trust what I say without me pulling shots, then, I mean, you can't trust me pulling shots on camera and tasting them because I could lie, right? So if you don't trust me in one, you're not going to trust me in the other. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, this was kind of a, you know, this is how it is video. This is my view after testing and using extensively hundreds, literally, of grinders over the years, hundreds of Burrs sets. I mean, heck, I've got Burrs all over the frickin' place. These are all filled with Burrs. I mean, we've got so many Burrs living in this house right now, and I have a whole drawer underneath back here that's filled with Burrs. I mean, we've got Burrs freaking everywhere. Okay, I am not new to the Burr game. There's like 40 pairs of SSPs in there right now. I'm not new to the Burr game. My life is mostly revolved around tasting coffee from different Burr sets and grinders and measuring them. And I would say I probably have more experience than most anyone in the world when it comes to the widest diversity of Burr and grinder experience. I don't know what to say. So take it for what you will, but just know, if you, and I'm not giving you all the answers in this video, obviously. I just want you to feel confident. For the majority of you that drink normal espresso, you're not really gaining a lot by spending a ton more money. If you are into really light roasted coffees, alternative styles of espresso, the kind of fad that's going on right now, which I'm definitely a part of, there is something to be said about jumping up to bigger Burr sets. Not just bigger Burr sets, so well-built grinders, because you need alignment. The bigger the Burr, the more important the alignment is, in my opinion. And playing around with Burr geometries, all those things do tend to make more sense when you go with really lightly roasted coffees. But even before all of that, let me say something very clearly. Your grinder does not matter if your coffee's crap. Invest in your coffee. That is priority numero uno. Don't sit around and save for a nice grinder and put crap coffee into it, because it ain't gonna make crap turn into diamonds, all right? A grinder is not magic. In fact, it's just going to, the more expensive you spend, the more it's going to surgically remove all the crap from the bean and show you how bad of a bean it is. That's what's going to happen with these higher clarity Burrs. So I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, comments, whatever, leave it down below, and I'll do my best to tend to some of them, because I know this is a more complex video than the filter one. There's just way more options on the market for espresso, and espresso in general is a much more convoluted beverage, and there's way more options. Mostly in the filter world, the majority of people obsessed with it do drink lighter coffee. In espresso, it is a huge spectrum. So I did my best to kind of, you know, put everything together as well as possible to give you an idea of how I think about each of these grinders and what they represent. But if you have questions, put them below. I'll do my best to respond. Even better, check out my Patreon, join that, get in my Discord, and we can talk, you know, tag me there. And of course, grinders go away in competitions. I'm about to do a Patreon competition for 3 different 64mm grinders. So check that out. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe. I've got to wipe off the sweat because it is hot out here. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize it until just now when I felt sweat going on my neck, but that's kind of gross. Thank you so much for watching. Again, it's always a pleasure. I love doing this. I love the community that we're building here, and always open to hearing what you have to say. Let's chat below. Thank you so much. The most important thing for me is that you brew something tasty today. Cheers.